On New Year's Eve, my sister handed me champagne and said, "This one's special, just for you." That's when I knew something was very wrong. It wasn't what she said, it was how she said it. The way her smile stretched too tight across her face, like she was trying to hold something back. The way she watched my hands as I reached for the glass, her eyes tracking every movement like I was about to perform surgery instead of taking a drink. Vanessa never cared what I drank. In the 8 years since I'd married Julian and moved into the family estate, she'd barely acknowledged my presence at holiday gatherings. She'd show up late, leave early, spend most of her time on her phone or whispering with her husband Greg in corners where they thought no one could hear them. But tonight she practically glowed as she pressed the champagne flute into my hands. "Drink up before midnight," she said, still smiling. "I added something special. You're going to love it." I looked down at the glass, golden bubbles rising through pale liquid, catching the light from the crystal chandelier overhead. Then I looked at Julian's glass on the marble counter next to mine, identical except for a small water ring on the base of his. I didn't think about it, I just acted. I reached over and switched them. Vanessa went completely still. For maybe 2 seconds, her face didn't move at all. Then she laughed. Too loud, too sharp. "Wait, no, that one's yours. I made it specifically for you." "They're both champagne," I said, taking a sip from Julian's glass. Cold, flat, like it had been sitting out for 20 minutes. Her smile cracked at the edges. Julian was across the room talking to their father about the new commercial development project downtown. He didn't notice when I set his original glass back down in front of him, didn't notice when he picked it up 10 minutes later and drained half of it in one gulp while laughing at something his father said. 15 minutes before midnight, Julian said he felt dizzy. 20 minutes later, he was sitting on the leather couch in the study, head in his hands, saying the room wouldn't stop spinning. By the time the countdown started on TV, Vanessa was in the hallway on her phone, voice low and frantic, and I was standing in the doorway watching her through the gap in the door. "It didn't work," she hissed into the phone. "She switched the glasses. Julian drank it instead." A pause. "I don't know how she knew. She switched them." Another pause, longer this time. "We can't wait another year. We're almost out of time." I stepped back before she could turn around and see me, walked back into the living room where Julian's parents were fussing over him, suggesting he'd mixed too many drinks, that he should lie down, that they'd call a doctor if it got worse. No one asked how I felt. No one even looked at me. The next morning, Vanessa called it food poisoning, said the shrimp appetizers must have been bad, that Julian always had a sensitive stomach anyway. Everyone nodded and agreed and moved on like nothing had happened. But I couldn't move on, because I was 29 years old and I'd just watched my sister-in-law try to drug me at a New Year's party in a house that belonged to my husband's family. A house where I'd lived for 8 years, but never quite felt like I belonged. A house worth $4.7 million that Julian's father had built from the ground up with his logistics company.
I didn't sleep that night. I sat in our bedroom with the lights off, listening to Julian snore beside me, and I replayed everything. Every conversation I'd half heard through walls, every look Vanessa and Greg had exchanged when Julian's father mentioned updating his will, every time they'd suggested Julian and I were too young to handle family business decisions. At 6 a.m, I got out of bed and went to Julian's home office. He kept everything there. Tax documents, property records, insurance papers, all of it filed away in matching gray cabinets that his mother had bought him when we got married. I found the folder in the 3rd drawer down, estate planning documents from last April. I almost missed it because it was labeled insurance updates in Vanessa's handwriting, but when I opened it, I saw exactly what it was. A trust document, signed by Julian, naming Vanessa as successor trustee in the event Julian became incapacitated or incompetent, giving her full control over his inheritance, his share of the family business, and his portion of the estate. My hands went numb. I flipped to the signature page. Julian's signature was there, quick and messy the way he always signed things, right below a paragraph explaining that this document superseded all previous arrangements and that Vanessa would have sole authority to make financial and medical decisions on his behalf. Julian never told me about this. I looked at the date, April 14th, right after his father had the heart scare and everyone thought he might not make it. Right when Vanessa had been coming over every other day with meals and help and concern. I took photos of every page with my phone. Then I put the folder back exactly where I found it and went downstairs to make coffee. Julian came down an hour later, still pale, still moving slowly. "I feel like I got hit by a truck," he said, pouring himself orange juice. "Must have been bad shrimp." He nodded, rubbing his temples. "Vanessa texted. She wants to come over later to check on me. Tell her we're busy." He looked up, surprised. I never said no to family visits. I'd spent 8 years being the perfect daughter-in-law, the quiet wife who smiled and nodded and stayed out of family business. "Are we busy?" "Yes," I said. "We need to talk." Something in my voice made him put down the juice. I showed him the photos on my phone, watched his face go from confused to shocked to angry in about 30 seconds. "I never signed this." "That's your signature." "I know, but I don't remember. I wouldn't." He scrolled through the images, his jaw tight. "She brought me papers last April, said Dad needed me to update my insurance beneficiaries because of the heart thing. I signed them at the kitchen table. She was rushing me, said Dad needed them filed that day." Those weren't insurance papers. I know that now. We sat there in the bright kitchen with winter sunlight coming through the windows, and I felt something shift between us. Not in a bad way, in a clarifying way, like we'd both been walking through fog and suddenly the air cleared. "What was in that champagne?" Julian asked quietly. "I don't know, but I know what it was supposed to do." He looked at me, really looked at me, maybe for the first time in months. "You switched the glasses on purpose." "I switched them because your sister was watching me like I was a lab rat and she was waiting for results." He was quiet for a long moment. Outside, a car door slammed. Someone's dog barked 3 houses down. "What do we do?" he asked. "We call a lawyer, today, right now." 2 hours later, we were sitting in the office of Elizabeth Hartley, an estate attorney Julian's father had recommended years ago. She was probably 60, with steel gray hair cut in a sharp bob and reading glasses on a chain around her neck. She read through the trust documents without changing expression. Then she read them again. "This is valid," she said finally. "It's been properly executed and notarized." "I didn't know what I was signing," Julian said. "That's fraud," Elizabeth said, "but proving it is another matter." She looked at me. "You said there was an incident on New Year's Eve?" I told her everything. The champagne, the switched glasses, Julian's reaction, the phone call I'd overheard. "Do you have any of the champagne left?" "No. Vanessa took both glasses to the kitchen before we left." Elizabeth nodded slowly. "Here's what we're going to do. First, we revoke this trust immediately and draft new documents with me as successor trustee. Second, we document everything that happened New Year's Eve in a sworn statement. Third, we run a full audit of any accounts or assets Vanessa has had access to." "You think she's been stealing?" Julian asked. "I think someone who would drug their sister-in-law to incapacitate their husband wouldn't hesitate to help themselves to family money." We spent the next 3 hours in that office. By the time we left, Julian had revoked the trust, signed new documents, and authorized Elizabeth to request financial records from the family business accounts. "Don't tell anyone about this yet," Elizabeth said as we were leaving. "Let me gather information first. If there's been financial misconduct, we'll need evidence." That night, Vanessa called Julian's phone 6 times. He didn't answer. She left voicemails saying she was worried, that she wanted to bring soup, that family needed to stick together. Julian deleted every message. 3 days later, Elizabeth called. "You need to come to my office," she said, "both of you, now." We drove in silence, the winter sky gray and heavy above us. I kept thinking about Vanessa's face when I switched those glasses, the way her smile had cracked, the way she'd gone so still. Elizabeth's office felt colder this time. She had folders spread across her desk, bank statements and spreadsheets covered in yellow highlighter. "I found it," she said without preamble. "Vanessa has been systematically transferring money from the family business into a personal account for the last 14 months. Small amounts at first, $2,000 here, $3,500 there, but it escalated. Last month alone, she moved $47,000. Julian went white. How much total? $186,000. The room felt like all the air had been sucked out of it. I could hear the clock on the wall ticking, could hear someone walking in the hallway outside. "My father doesn't know?" Julian asked. "I don't believe so. She's been careful. The transfers are categorized as vendor payments and consulting fees. Anyone doing a casual review would miss it. But you didn't miss it." "I wasn't doing a casual review." Elizabeth slid a folder across the desk. "I also found something else. Vanessa and Greg took out a $340,000 loan 6 months ago. They're 3 months behind payments. The bank sent a final notice last week."
"They're broke," I said. "They're drowning," Elizabeth corrected. "And based on the timeline, I believe they intended to have Julian declared incompetent, assume control of his assets through the fraudulent trust, and use his inheritance to cover their debts." Julian stood up, walked to the window, stood there with his back to us, hands in his pockets. "What do we do?" he asked again, but this time his voice was different, harder. "We can file a police report," Elizabeth said. "This is embezzlement, fraud, possibly attempted poisoning, though that would be harder to prove without the physical evidence. If we do that, it destroys the family. If you don't do that, she'll try again." Julian turned around. "What would you do?" Elizabeth didn't hesitate. "I'd burn her to the ground." That night, we told Julian's parents everything. His mother cried. His father didn't say a word for 10 full minutes, just sat in his leather chair in the study, staring at the financial documents Elizabeth had prepared. When he finally spoke, his voice was quiet and cold. "Call the police." Vanessa was arrested 4 days later. They took her from her house in the morning while Greg was at work. The charges were embezzlement, fraud, and attempted assault with a controlled substance based on Julian's toxicology report from the hospital we'd insisted he visit. Turns out there was Rohypnol in his system, enough to cause confusion and disorientation, but not enough to kill, just enough to make someone appear incompetent. If you're enjoying this story, comment where you're watching from, and if it pleases you, subscribe to my channel. It helps me know you enjoy these stories and motivates me to keep making more. Also, it really helps the channel grow. The news spread through their social circle like wildfire. Within 48 hours, everyone knew. The country club, the charity board Vanessa sat on, the private school where she volunteered, everyone. Julian's father made sure of it. He didn't do it quietly either. He called every single person in their social network and told them exactly what his daughter had done. Embezzlement, fraud, attempted drugging. He said the words clearly, slowly, like he wanted them to understand the weight of each one. "My daughter stole from her own family," he told the president of the country club. "She tried to incapacitate my son so she could steal his inheritance. I want everyone to know what kind of person she is." Vanessa's memberships were revoked within the week. The charity board asked her to resign. The school banned her from campus. Greg filed for divorce on day 9. I watched it all happen from a distance, like watching a building collapse in slow motion. Part of me felt sick. Part of me felt nothing at all. Mostly, I felt relief that it was her instead of me. 2 weeks after the arrest, Vanessa called me. I was in the kitchen making lunch when my phone buzzed. Her name appeared on the screen, and I stared at it for a long moment before answering. "What do you want?" "Please." Her voice was raw, broken. "Please, I need you to talk to Julian. I need you to make him drop the charges." "No. I'm begging you. They're going to send me to prison. Do you understand that? Prison for years. You tried to drug me. It wasn't supposed to hurt you. It was just supposed to make you confused for a few hours. That's it. We weren't going to actually hurt anyone." I laughed, actually laughed, cold and sharp. "You were going to have Julian declared incompetent and steal everything his family built. You embezzled almost $200,000. How was that not hurting anyone?" "We were desperate." She was crying now, ugly, sobbing breaths that made her words come out in gasps. "We were about to lose everything. The house, the cars, everything. I just needed time to fix it." "By stealing from your brother?" "By borrowing. I was going to pay it back." "With what money, Vanessa? You're broke." Silence, just the sound of her breathing and crying on the other end of the line. "I'm your sister," she said finally. "No, you're Julian's sister, and you tried to destroy him." I hung up. She called back immediately. I blocked her number. The preliminary hearing was scheduled for late February. Elizabeth told us the prosecutor had a solid case, that Vanessa's lawyer was already talking about a plea deal. "They'll offer her a reduced sentence in exchange for a guilty plea," Elizabeth explained during a meeting in her office. "Probably 3 to 5 years with the possibility of parole. And if she doesn't take it?" Julian asked. "Then we go to trial, and based on the evidence, she'll likely get 8 to 10 years. Julian's father sat in the corner of the office, silent and stone-faced. He'd aged 10 years in the past month, new lines around his eyes, new gray in his hair. "Let her make her own choice," he said quietly. "I'm done protecting her." Vanessa took the plea deal. 3 years in minimum security, full restitution of the embezzled funds, permanent restraining order preventing her from contacting any member of the family without written permission from a judge. The sentencing hearing was on a Thursday morning in March, cold rain hammering against the courthouse windows, the kind of rain that soaks through everything. We sat in the gallery. Me, Julian, his parents. Vanessa sat at the defense table in a gray suit that looked 2 sizes too big, her hair pulled back in a severe bun. She looked small, diminished. The judge read the sentence without emotion. 3 years, restitution, restraining order. Vanessa didn't react. She just stood there, hands folded in front of her, staring straight ahead. When they led her away, she looked back once. Her eyes found mine across the courtroom. I didn't look away. I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel vindicated. I just felt tired. After the hearing, Julian's father invited us to lunch at his favorite restaurant downtown, the kind of place with white tablecloths and waiters who remembered your order. We sat in a booth by the window, watching the rain streak down the glass. "I'm changing my will," Julian's father said, without preamble. "Vanessa gets nothing. Everything will be split between Julian and any grandchildren you give me." Julian nodded slowly. "Okay. I also want to apologize to you." He looked at me directly for the first time since we'd sat down. "I should have seen what she was doing. I should have protected you better." "You couldn't have known." "I should have known my own daughter well enough to see she was capable of this." We ate in silence after that. The food was excellent, but I barely tasted it. 1 month later, Greg's divorce from Vanessa was finalized. He'd moved to Colorado for work, cut all ties with the family. Vanessa's friends stopped visiting her in prison after the 3rd week. Her phone calls went unanswered, her letters came back unopened. She was alone. Julian and I started seeing a therapist together. Not because our marriage was falling apart, but because we realized we'd been living separate lives in the same house for years. We'd been going through the motions, playing the roles we thought we were supposed to play. The sessions were hard. We talked about things we'd been avoiding for years.
about how I'd felt like an outsider in his family, about how he'd felt trapped between me and them, about how we'd both been too afraid to be honest with each other. But slowly, things started to shift. We started having breakfast together every morning, started talking about our days instead of just existing in the same space, started making plans for the future instead of just surviving the present. 6 months after Vanessa's sentencing, Julian's father had another heart scare. Not as bad as the first one, but bad enough that he spent 3 days in the hospital. When he came home, he called us into his study. "I'm retiring," he said, "effective immediately. Julian, the business is yours. I've already talked to the board. They're expecting you Monday morning." Julian blinked. "Dad, I don't know if I'm ready." "You're ready. You've been ready for years. I just didn't want to let go." He looked at both of us. "I'm tired. I want to travel with your mother. I want to play golf. I want to stop working 60-hour weeks and actually live." "What about the estate?" I asked. "That's yours too. All of it. The house, the properties, everything. Consider it an early inheritance." We moved into the main house that summer. Julian's parents bought a condo in Florida and spent most of their time there, coming back only for holidays and special occasions. The house felt different with just the two of us, lighter somehow, like all the weight of family history and expectation had lifted. I repainted the guest rooms, replaced the heavy curtains with sheer white ones that let in more light, planted a garden in the backyard with vegetables and herbs and wildflowers that bloomed in chaotic bursts of color. Julian threw himself into running the company. He was good at it, better than his father had been, more innovative, more willing to take risks. The business grew by 23% in the first year under his leadership. We had dinner parties, small ones with people we actually liked instead of people we felt obligated to impress. We laughed more, fought less, started talking about having kids. 1 year after Vanessa's sentencing, she sent a letter. It arrived on a Tuesday afternoon in a plain white envelope with the prison's return address stamped in the corner. Julian brought it in from the mailbox, and we sat at the kitchen table staring at it for a long moment before he opened it. The letter was short, 2 paragraphs written in shaky handwriting. "Julian, I know I don't deserve forgiveness. I know what I did was unforgivable, but I need you to know that I'm sorry. Not sorry I got caught, sorry for what I tried to do, sorry for who I became. I've had a lot of time to think in here about our childhood, about Dad's expectations, about how I always felt like I was competing with you for his approval. I let that poison me. I let it turn me into someone I don't recognize. I'm not asking you to write back. I'm not asking for anything. I just wanted you to know that I'm sorry. Vanessa." Julian read it twice. Then he folded it carefully and put it back in the envelope. "What do you think?" he asked. "I think she's sorry she's in prison." "That's not fair. You didn't see her face at the sentencing." "I saw her face when she handed me that champagne." He was quiet for a moment. "Do you think people can change?" "I think people can regret consequences. That's not the same as changing." He nodded slowly. Then he took the letter and put it in his desk drawer. Not thrown away, not answered, just filed away like everything else from that chapter of our lives. We didn't talk about Vanessa after that. She existed somewhere in the background of our lives, serving her sentence, but she wasn't part of our daily reality anymore. 18 months after her sentencing, I got pregnant. We told Julian's parents over video call. His mother cried happy tears. His father got quiet in that way he did when he was feeling emotional but didn't want to show it. "What are you hoping for?" his mother asked. "Boy or girl?" "Healthy," Julian said, reaching over to take my hand. "That's all that matters." The baby was due in March. We spent the winter preparing, painting the nursery a soft yellow, building furniture, reading parenting books, and arguing good-naturedly about names. On New Year's Eve, exactly 2 years after the champagne incident, we stayed home, just the two of us, a bottle of sparkling cider and Chinese takeout from our favorite place down the street. We sat on the couch watching the countdown on TV, my head on Julian's shoulder, his hand resting on my growing belly. "Are you happy?" he asked as the crowd on TV started chanting down from 60. "Yes." "No regrets?" I thought about it. Really thought about it. About Vanessa in prison, about Greg in Colorado, about all the ugliness and betrayal and pain that had led us here. No regrets. The countdown hit 0. Fireworks exploded on the TV screen. Julian kissed me, soft and gentle, and I felt the baby kick. 2 years ago, someone tried to destroy my life. Instead, they destroyed their own. And I was still here, still standing, still building something good with someone I loved. Vanessa was released from prison 18 months later on good behavior. Julian's father told us over the phone, his voice carefully neutral. "She's moving to Oregon," he said. "She got a job at a call center. She won't be coming back here." "Good," Julian said. "She asked if she could see pictures of the baby." "No." There was a long pause. "Okay." Our daughter was 6 months old by then. Beautiful and healthy and perfect. We named her Charlotte after Julian's grandmother. Sometimes I wondered if Vanessa thought about her, if she lay awake at night in whatever small apartment she was renting in Oregon and thought about the niece she'd never meet, the family she'd destroyed with her own greed. Mostly, I didn't think about her at all. 3 years after that initial New Year's Eve, we were hosting our own party, small but warm. Julian's parents flew in from Florida, Elizabeth came with her husband, some friends from the business, some friends I'd made at my book club. Charlotte toddled around in a sparkly dress, charming everyone who looked at her. At 11:45, Julian pulled me into the kitchen. "I want to make a toast at midnight," he said. "Is that too cheesy?" Extremely cheesy. I'm doing it anyway. When the countdown started, everyone gathered in the living room with their champagne. Julian raised his glass.
3 years ago, someone tried to take everything from us, he said. Our family, our future, our trust in each other. They failed. And in failing, they gave us something unexpected: clarity. The chance to rebuild on our own terms. The opportunity to choose what really matters. He looked at me, his eyes bright. "So here's to second chances, to family you build instead of family you're born into, to the people who stand with you when everything falls apart." "Cheers," everyone called out. The glasses clinked, Charlotte squealed with delight, and I stood there in our home, surrounded by people who actually cared about us and felt something I hadn't felt in years. Safe. The clock struck midnight. Fireworks lit up the sky outside our windows, and I knew with absolute certainty that we'd won. Not because Vanessa was in Oregon working at a call center, not because we had the house and the money and the business. We'd won because we were still here, still together, still building something good.